You might want to hear more on this comment by today's guest.
If you get contempt for someone, that's a hard ditch to get out of, right? And you have to allow yourself an open mind about where they're coming from.
This is On the Other Hand. A podcast sponsored by Braver Angels in Arkansas that explores politics and other issues of importance to Arkansans. We do that through conversations with various community leaders, so stay with us as we talk to another leader in Arkansas who works across differences to get things done, to solve problems, and to bring us closer together. In part one of our conversation with Bob Estes, we explored his history of community involvement, especially in coordinating Arkansas Peace Week, as well as the personal values that fueled his community actions. Now let's get to the second part of our conversation with Bob Estes. Given all the incivility in our political environment these days, and how much it's easier to be very tribal and to kind of put down the other side. In cases like that, given that we have that kind of environment, how do you approach your conversations with people who have very different views from you? I guess you did tell us you try to be curious. Do you have any other things that you do that you think would make people feel safe enough to actually hear what you have to say coming from the other direction?
Well, you gotta listen to them first and
Yeah.
build some trust that way. I was talking to a fellow last week or 2 weeks ago, and he was just kind of going on this rant and saying things from I guess the MAGA side, and he mentioned um, all these protesters that were being paid to protest, and among other things. And it's like, I understand what you're saying, but I know a lot of protesters, and none of them are getting paid. And if you say something like, I told him, if you say something like that, you're going to really lose credibility because the other side's going to know, they're going to say, well, he doesn't have any idea what he's talking about if he's saying that. And that you'll be probably more successful with getting your point across if you avoid that topic. And maybe there are some other topics like that. And yeah, he said, okay, I can take that. And he moved on, And there's a couple of other things, I think maybe both sides had said during that conversation that we withdrew probably what we had said before after better conversation and consideration, because they were probably things that were either hyperbolic or maybe not true at all. And when maybe the tone of the conversation decreased a little bit, that was something we were able to let go of, and we weren't going to make a point on that.
Okay, it's good to and positive to hear that you can actually have these difficult conversations. Things can go bad, and then you can kind of rescue it, turn it around, and have people continuing to listen to each other and come away without a highly combative kind of situation. That's encouraging to hear.
It is, it really is interesting how maybe a single concession on something or an acknowledgement saying, I understand what you're saying with that. I think that's a point, can really change the tone in a room too. If you give a little breathing room around that space that maybe allows you to move someplace else. And your workshops, get into that, right? And
Right.
it can really help disarm a situation if you kind of use some of those skills.
Appreciate hearing that. So occasionally, when you have these conversations across views, you get to a point with some people where they don't want to have any kind of dialogue with the other side. Uh, Folks say, no, they're hopeless. Give up on them. We just have to fight. I hear that a lot And I appreciate where they're coming from. They're saying we have some important values that are being jeopardized and we need to fight for those values. So that part I understand, but the idea of giving up on the other side entirely is concerning to me. And I wonder what if you have any thoughts on that or any of the concerns about working across differences and how you deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, if you get contempt for someone, that's a hard ditch to get out of, right? And you have to allow yourself an open mind about where they're coming from and an understanding of that. I think part of the problem is that we see their actions or maybe some of their words, but we like to throw, speculation of what their motivation is, which we may not know what their motivation is, particularly the way we have conversation. I've got a sign, I think it's in the shed right now, but it says, I dream of a world where a chicken can cross the road without its motives being questioned. And if you've already given an assumption about what motivates somebody, I mean, first off, how do you know, right? It's particularly if you don't ever have a conversation with them. But there's a lot of beliefs people that have their sincere held beliefs. They may be right, they may be wrong, but if you reinforcing that with a badge, you're doing this because of this, it, there's nowhere much where that conversation is going to go because chances are you're right. Just like the guy that says, well, they're only doing that because they're getting paid to protest. Well, okay, that's just not right. I mean, and I think if you kind of back down on what someone's motives are and give them the benefit of doubt and some empathy about why they may have reached this place, you're going to have more success.
Well said. How do you see social media shaping or probably often distorting our ability to understand one another and reach across these divides?
I did a few weeks ago, I did a like a little inventory of what showed up in my Facebook feed. And it was amazing that like less than 10% of it was a post from a friend of mine or something that I liked or joined. It was all, most of it was ads or suggestions for other groups I might join or some similar content that I might have been interested in. And there's so little there that was really kind of what I thought I might have wanted, but still were very attracted to it. But one thing I noticed was that, let's say it was benign. I get feeds about handyman work and plumbing work and things like that. And there'll be a picture of some job, some plumbing job or some electrical job that someone did there. And it's okay, it's wrong. Anybody knows that's not right, but there'll be a comment that says, I just finished my sink plumbing job. I think I did a great job. So they've got something there that it's obviously wrong. And the algorithm's just driving you to reply with a statement saying you're wrong, you're not right. It's like, but they algorithms drive this conflict, and I think in particular it spins up if if you get find yourself been agitated and driving toward more conflict, even on some of them there's both sides on the same page, some of them it's just all the left or all the right, which seems like it's even worse then because there's no filter then. But I deleted Facebook from my phone. It's still on my computer, but I don't miss it very much. But it certainly seems to benefit from conflict and the way their algorithms are. And as we're trying to sort out conversations, not only some that you've never even seen or heard for, uh, and they've got you poised to get in an argument with each other, that's a losing battle, but reinforced by what they're doing, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that the algorithms in social media are designed to engage, and the things that engage people's
Hmm.
attention are usually emotionally based, which means something you strongly agree with or you strongly disagree with. And I agree with. I have toyed several times with the idea of getting rid of Facebook myself for the same reason. It's so much of it is just kind of non-productive yelling at the other side, or increasingly what appears to be AI or bot driven
Yeah.
kinds of things that are just like time wasting. But unfortunately, it's pretty addictive, and a lot of us uh, get into it, even people who probably are smart enough to know better. And I include myself at the front of that line. So,
Yeah. If it's now that it's not on my phone anymore, I mainly look and see what the weather forecast is on my phone. So I
yeah.
find something more productive.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about divisions, and we often talk about the political, let's look at other possibilities. Maybe there's some divides in Arkansas we don't talk enough about: cultural, generational, urban, rural. Any thoughts about other things we need to be looking at in terms of divisions that we need to heal?
The urban rural divide is kind of interesting. I live in the very center of Little Rock, and lots of people in Little Rock, they don't really, they don't, I mean, unless they're going to the lake or to their cabin, they don't want to spend quality time in the rural areas. They don't want to hang out in a little town and those sort of things. I think they look down on rural communities. They think that they're uneducated and unsophisticated. And likewise, the lots of rural people don't want to come to Little Rock. They don't think it's safe. They don't think the people have the same values as they do. They maybe have fear for different races or things like that. I mean, we don't really do a whole lot to come together that way. I think certainly the politics when they're trying to find a candidate, like a nationwide candidate that can appeal to both, is challenging. I mean, a statewide candidate is challenging to walk that balance. But it is a shame because we all have something to learn from each other. Um, and then the wealth gap in Arkansas is as big as it is anywhere in the country, I would imagine. We have the richest family in the country here, and we've got some very, very poor people. And I think there's also kind of this, contempt for poor people is similar to the rural people that we think they're unsophisticated and uneducated. Um, and beneath us, which is a shame. I kind of saw that in the Democratic Party and things. There was this, they kind of drove people. They would criticize people for being uneducated um, and not intelligent often, and that's the way to drive away voters, right?
Yep.
And it's a shame.
Yeah, I get that. I had that experience growing up in rural Mississippi, and then I was one of those unfortunate people who was given a brain that didn't do very well with the kind of things that people around me were doing well, like what you've talked about, kind of the handyman kind of stuff. So I had to learn to do something else. Education was important for me to survive and to go in a different direction. But one of the things that stuck with me was how people are human beings in the rural and environment. They're smart. They may use it in a different context, but there's nothing wrong with people who are rural who don't necessarily have a college education. And I hate to see people putting down people just because they're rural or because they don't have advanced education. We all have something to contribute, and I just think it's unfortunate. And I appreciate what you're saying there. Um, Another divide might be the age division. And given the way things are going for young people these days, I know that you have a little bit of a handle on that with the work that you're doing in the peace work. How do you see young people stepping up now? And do you have any hope that the younger generation actually may be a positive influence going forward for us?
Thank you for asking that. I look at myself when I was young and my peers. We didn't do anything. We were just very selfish, I thought, um, and weren't particularly interested in making a better world. Um, but the the young people that I've worked with, usually in the peace movement and other activist views, and from junior high on up to young adults, I am particularly impressed with. I'm impressed with their motivation and what they can do and what they can hold up as accomplishments. And whether you're young or older, like why I was when I became active, we need to give those people the opportunity to do these things. I've seen organizations that get very stuck with the status quo of who their leaders are and what types of things they do, and they don't survive. You got to have a succession plan and being able to adjust what you do as times change. And if someone is eager and wants to try something, that's the best thing an organization can do is to give them that opportunity. I get really frustrated with both all the different generations bashing each other. It's real popular to bash the baby boomers. I guess it still is. And I was like in the last cusp of the baby boomers. I think I'm really a Gen Xer, but technically I'm not. But you know, the boomers, they've got a lot of credibility in social movements and things that they led, I think, better than some of the younger groups maybe have. But likewise, the older generations like to bash millennials and Gen Zs because different reasons, and it's like, you know, get over it, right? Everybody's got their way to contribute, and everybody's done different do things different ways. And by the way, every young generation has been criticized by the older generations for, centuries as they explore new things and new ways of doing things that seem odd. And, I guess the same way the older generations may seem odd and stated as well, but they've likely done some great things as well.
As a boomer, I appreciate hearing that. Yeah, the old okay boomer, I
Uh,
get where they're coming from there, and sometimes it's deserved. But yeah, the boomers did go through a lot of difficult times that the generations since have not had to go through. But I
uh,
believe we're going through some difficult things now that I
the
appreciate
bo
the youngers being there for that.
the boomers changed the world, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
you guys are responsible for the 60s, right?
yeah.
For the most part. Okay. Yeah.
Or blamed for it, depending on how you
Well, there's some of that
how you
too.
look for it.
But there's
There's
this,
some of both sides. Yeah.
there's this thought that like, yeah, they did all that stuff, and then when they turned 30, they just all changed and became selfish or whatever. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, great.
And some did. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, um, I want to get into the idea of community because obviously we both have done a lot of community work. And one of the things that in Braver Angels, our new CEO is talking a lot about community involvement and trying to get the community, regardless of other differences, to work together on something. That's what we need in a functioning, healthy democracy. And so I wonder if you have any thoughts about changes that would improve the community dynamic here in Central Arkansas, or what other people could do to just kind of get involved in the community and make a difference.
look for something you're interested in and be curious about it. I mean, I think particularly now, there are so many organizations doing different things. When I first started with like the Arkansas Coalition for Peace and Justice and Arkansas One, we were like kind of the only like social justice organizations around, and we were we would get calls on all sorts of different topics. But now there are a lot of people doing, a lot of interesting things. And um, some of them are a bit fun, right? And look for something that appeals to you, you can have some fun with. And, if you're already in one of those organizations and someone else comes along, throw them the ball. Let them run with it a little bit. Let them try things. Don't be afraid to fail, because that's what we do. Some things are always, I do a lot of grass works, low budget stuff, and and you, you just try, and some things work better than others.
That's good suggestions. Any specific skills or habits that would be helpful to people who say, I want to be involved in community service, but I want to be effective? What kinds of things do they need to keep in mind to be effective in that work?
Someone told me that the most important attribute when you're doing this sort of work is flexibility. And I think that's true because you're moving in and out with different types of people, and some people come and they'll go. And what, worked well for you last week may not work very well this week. And someone may come along with a different way of doing it. And I think you got to be looking for opportunities to be able to change. I think the other thing, particularly if you're doing a social justice work, is just a, a heart with empathy and caring, and trying to step back and consider where people are coming from. I think that I'm a lot more empathetic than I was 20 years ago. And I think part of that has to do with working with this sort of thing. I don't think I was ever a really mean guy, but I think I'm a lot nicer guy now than I used to be as far as being patient and understanding and working with folks.
That's an interesting thought. Talking about empathy, you feel like you're more empathetic now, and it made you better, more kind. And yet, some are saying that empathy is a problem. Elon Musk is famous for having said that. I forget exactly his quote, but it was kind of like that's one of the worst things that's happened to Western civilization is the growth of empathy. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, even to suggest that is ridiculous. I mean, I guess like I remember reading about the Roman Empire, and apparently they didn't have an ounce of empathy in their whole nation, and it was something that wasn't valued. But I think we moved past that, and um, it's easy to be cynical out there and look for reasons not to care. Um, Another quote: "There's a British folk punk rocker named Billy Bragg, and he had a quote that says, a cynic is someone that's given up and they want you to give up too." And I'm not giving up. And you need to be looking for opportunities to step on cynicism because it's defeating.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that quote. What you were saying before about the Roman Empire lacking empathy reminds me that back then the big counter-revolutionary, of course, was Jesus, because he was preaching empathy, right, about loving your
Yeah,
neighbor
yeah.
and all, and getting down on the religious leaders of the day and the governmental leaders of the day for, you know, do this, do that in terms of your religious rituals, but not acting it out in real life. So that's kind of an interesting thought.
Well, when they tried him, when they went in front of Pilate, they accused him of subverting the empire, I think. And maybe he
Yeah,
was by preaching empathy, because I don't think it was a virtue that Rome had a bunch of empathy. But,
yeah. He was definitely a threat to the empire. That's for sure. If
I guess so.
people are discouraged, and goodness knows there's plenty of reason for people to feel discouraged these days by all the divisions and negativity going on, what would you say to them to keep them encouraged and involved?
Uh, I'm an optimistic guy, and my wife Jane, she gets discouraged a lot, and she's told me things, and now she says, "Well, I told you this would happen. You said it before, and you were wrong. You said it wouldn't happen. This is exactly what has happened." And it's like, well, okay, you're right, but you gotta, you can't live there. You can't live in that space of despair. You've got to go out, at least walk outside and see what else you can find. Because at least I can't, because I think it's defeating if you don't find some threshold or traction to get at.
Yeah, I wonder if sometimes it's a matter of, yeah, there's reason to be discouraged and expect the worst. But the optimists, maybe they're just a little ahead of their time. Eventually, things do turn around, sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better, but there's
Yeah,
always a
yeah,
change.
right after the election in 2024, the the Clintons were in town and they were speaking. This was like 2 weeks after down at the Robinson Center, and they just started off saying, don't despair. Don't defeat yourself. Things we've been here before and they'll get better without mentioning anybody's name. But it's true if you don't if you allow yourself to get into a ditch, it's hard to get out sometimes, I think.
Yeah. Okay. We're getting close to wrapping up, so let's have you expand your radar a bit and talk about Arkansas politics today. Where do you think we're going? Where does the future take us in Arkansas politics? And both the things that concern you as well as the things that give you hope, being the optimistic guy that you are.
Yeah, I'm really interested in I haven't been involved with party politics very much lately. I got tired of that, although I appreciate what they're doing. I've got some friends that are running in some races this year that I look forward to support. But I think what really intrigues me is what's going to go on, and I think a lot of it's going to be in the courts as far as enabling citizen-led ballot initiatives and constitutional amendments in Arkansas. Um, and I think, they've the legislature has made it harder and harder to get a citizen-led ballot initiative on the ballots. And you have to get more signatures. You got to get them from different places. You have to be more. There's more of a bureaucracy about it, and things have been thrown out for basically technicalities. Um, and I think there's things going to be played out in the courts, but right now there's a couple of big ballot initiatives that are going to, if they were able to get in the ballot and um, pass, they're going to rewrite how all that's going to work. Uh, and if so, that could really change what the people are able to do. I remember seeing a tweet from one of our state legislatures saying, people are, I think it was something like, the people are wrong. The people do not rule in Arkansas. Of course, our motto is Regis Populus, people rule, right? But there's this notion that, like we were talking about before, the people are dumb. They don't know what they're thinking. Which is, I think, is kind of ridiculous. But states like Arkansas and Oklahoma, which are pretty conservative states, have passed some pretty serious ballot initiatives that change the landscape on a couple of different things. Some of them maybe not as good as others, but I think if we can keep that right, there will be a spark. Particularly if we can kind of adjust the way those laws are working, there'll be a spark for doing things continually. Uh, I don't, know what's going to happen in the governor's office and in the legislature. Those are pretty one-sided, but there are examples, I think, where there can be people coming together and working together. And, it happens in the communities and the municipal level as well. And maybe it can still continue on in uh, at the statewide level too.
Okay. Hopeful thought there. Well, let's finish up with just something a little more personal for you. Maybe, do you have anything in particular that you practice regularly to kind of help you have some peace of mind or make things better for you? Anything that you can share that might be helpful for other people to hear?
Probably the most regular thing I do is Jane and I will walk almost every afternoon, 20 or 30 minutes, and talk amongst ourselves about what's going on in some of these issues. I think that regulates what we're doing. I would like to get into some more, disciplined ways of meditating and reflecting, and but I haven't really adopted all those. But I think maybe probably the most practical thing is Jane and I's daily walk.
Okay. Bob, when you look back years from now and you look back at what you've done, particularly in any area, but especially with your community service, what impact do you hope people will be able to say Bob made on his community?
When I think about what I would like to do, I always think about something that I've made happen that wouldn't have happened if Bob wasn't around. I mean, I like to roll up my sleeves and help people to do other things, but if you can create something that wouldn't have been created if you weren't doing that thing, that's pretty cool, I think. And, I don't think Peace Week would be Peace Week if it wasn't for Bob. And I don't know what's going to happen to it after Bob checks out, but something else will happen, and maybe they'll shape some of that model that we put together because it's something that can be translated and morphed into something else, and even maybe even on different issues. I think the way we organize that with trying to get individuals and different groups to jump in and coalesce around a central theme while still maintaining their independence is uh, a clever way of doing it and offloading some of the work to other folks as well.
Very good. Yeah, everybody has to move on at some point, do different things. New people have to take the mantle. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate a fascinating conversation today. Here's your last chance. Anything that we missed that you failed to say that you'd like to share with our listeners?
You mentioned the fast cars earlier,
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, so one of Jane and I's first date was at an autocross where you take your road car, and it used to be up at Petit Jean Airport, and they'd set cones around that airport, and you could see how fast you could drive around them. And I never done it. I asked Jane, "Do you want to do this?" And she said, "Nah." But then, like the night beforehand, this was like our second date. She called back and said, "I think I will join you." So we went up there together, and 25 years, no, 26 years ago now, I guess. And they gave us some instruction. We each had a chance to drive, and one of the instructors offered to ride along with Jane while she drove. So he jumps up there, and apparently maybe he was saying whoa, 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 and she thought he was saying go, go, go or something. But
Oops.
she came around this corner and didn't slow down and drove off the runway, what it was, down a little berm and almost ran into a barbed wire fence. She was
Ooh.
just inches away from it. But she didn't hurt my car. She didn't hurt herself. She said I was very forgiving and kind to her after that and wanted to make sure that she was safe. And I think she left that day feeling better about me than that she went there. So
Ah,
was,
key point in the relationship.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Showed your real colors. Okay. Bob, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here today, and we wish you best of luck in whatever you do in the peace work or wherever else you work in the future. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, that's it for the second part of today's conversation with Bob Estes. We hope that Bob's story gave you a little more hope and a reminder that we can do good things together. If you liked what you heard, share the episode with a friend and help us spread stories of bridge building across Arkansas. And remember, On the Other Hand offers dozens of interviews just like this one. You can find our On the Other Hand podcast inside your favorite podcast app or on the podcast page of the Braver Angels Arkansas website at arkansas.braverangels.org. Music was composed by Randall Standridge of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and was performed by the University of Northern Colorado Symphonic Band, Dr. Richard Main conductor. I'm your host, Glenn White. We invite you to join us in working to make our relationships and communities better.